Hello everyone, Hannah Levin here with Heartfelt Wellbeing, back for another Tuesday Talk with Hannah. And today we're going to talk about a topic that makes a lot of people squeamish, which is poop, which is a topic that I talk a lot with my clients about because our poop can tell us a lot about what's happening inside our bodies and our overall health and well-being. And so I wanted to give you some insights from an Ayurvedic perspective and also some tips and tricks in case you are experiencing some elimination adventures right now. So this is also in alignment with leading the autumn detox right now. So the autumn detox is going on. We are starting the second of 3 weeks, and some digestive things are coming up, and you'll see why in just a little bit. So even when we detox, pooping is one of the best ways to move things out of our systems that we don't want in there. And you can see why in just a little bit this might become challenged over the course of intentionally detoxing or removing gunk from the system. So I have some notes here. I have some notes that I've written, so I'll be looking down, and then I also have some notes on my computer, so I'll be looking down here. So just so you know, that's what's happening if I'm like looking off in different places. I want to make sure that I'm sticking to a plan and that I am getting all of this amazing information in here for you all to enjoy and take advantage of. So our elimination tells us a lot about what is happening inside, as I just mentioned before. So from an Ayurvedic perspective, the digestive tract is seen as a snake, and the mouth, specifically the tongue, is seen as the head of the snake. And then we have the body of the snake that goes down, winds around, does different things in the body. We have the stomach, the small intestine, the large intestine, the colon, and then we have the anus, which is seen as the tail of the snake. And what happens between the head and the tail, we don't know a whole lot. Like, we're not see-through beings, right? So we can't really see what's happening inside. But what we can do is check out the tongue, and I have other videos about tongue analysis and what we can learn from looking at our tongues. And we also can learn a lot by looking at what comes out the other end, our elimination, and it can really give us a lot of insight. So one of the things that a lot of people don't know is that we want to have at least one complete bowel movement every day. This is something that I didn't know, ironically, until I started studying Ayurveda in my mid-30s. So I didn't know that, and as somebody who has more of a Vata constitution, and I'll get more into the constitutional aspects of pooping in a little bit, I naturally didn't, or kind of had a tendency, an imbalance towards constipation. And so I just thought that was normal because it was my normal. And so I just thought, well, I'm just built this way. But we want to have at least one. Some of you that are more pitta predominant are going, one, I have several every day. Right. That's your constitution, right? So there's no set, other than having at least one complete bowel movement every day, there's no set amount of bowel movements that everybody is supposed to have. So if you hear certain people out there saying everybody should have a complete elimination after every meal, that's somebody that's pitta predominant, that's thinking everybody else is pitta predominant, and that's not fair to the rest of us. But we do want to have at least one full, complete bowel movement every day. So that might look like a foot to 18 inches of a poop. And ideally we want it to look like a ripe banana. So it's connected, it stays connected, it's soft, but it holds together. And the color can differ depending on your constitution and also depending on what you're eating. When we look at the components that go into making up a healthy digestive and elimination system, we want to look at these concepts of Agni and Ama. If you've been following me for a while, you are familiar with these words. Agni is your digestive fire, and it's our ability to break down and assimilate what we take in. So we have Agni in our minds and in our eyes, as well as in our digestive tract. For today, we're focusing just on the digestive Agni. And the Agni is different in each of the digestive organs. It's governed by a different dosha. So the stomach is governed by Kapha, the small intestine by Pitta, and the large intestine by Vata. And so each of these digestive organs has a different type of Agni. So the stomach Agni is very different from like the colon Agni, we could say. And I'm not going to get into all the nitty gritty there. But what we want to know is that we want to have healthy functioning Agni in our digestive system to be able to have health and well-being. Remember, Ayurveda knew way back over 5,000 years ago that our health originates in our gut. And Western medicine is just now discovering this, that our gut microbiome is key for everything else in our system functioning, from hormone balance to brain chemistry to our everything. The health of our organism originates in the gut. And what's also interesting is that we are mostly made up of other organisms. Like, we are less human cells than we are bacterial cells. So we rely on the health of the digestive biome for us to be healthy and happy. And this is really key. Like, this is bringing in kind of the modern science if we look at the microbiome. But Ayurveda knew this before we had all the modern scientific ways of knowing what a microbiome is. Ayurveda knew that the health of our gut really is key to everything else working. So we want to have awesome Agni, check. What gets in the way of awesome Agni is Ama. And Ama is literally undigested food stuff, or we could say it's toxins that build up in the gut and then create problems. And then we have issues like what we call now leaky gut, where we have lots of things like medications, antibiotics, even our food sources that are not clean that end up tearing holes in the lining of the gut. And this creates what we now know as leaky gut. So things that should stay in the gut are leaking out into the body, into other places, and this wreaks havoc. So Ama is the enemy of an awesome functioning digestive system. So what we're doing right now in the detox is we are clearing Ama, cultivating Agni, and that will set us up for a really healthy and happy winter. And we want to do the detoxing experience of the joints in the seasons. So when the shifts come in the spring and in the fall, we want to clear out whatever came before so that we're not carrying it into either the cold or the hot time of the year and creating more issues. We want less issues, right? So one way that we can look at what our Ama load is coating on the tongue. So if you look in a mirror and stick out your tongue, you'll see maybe there's a coating on your tongue. Maybe there's a coating just at the back of your tongue, maybe the middle of the tongue, maybe the front of the tongue. Again, check out my other videos about tongue analysis. We can also see an Ama load in the stool, and I'll get into what that can look like, but some general things are if we have undigested food, or we have mucus in the stool, or if there's things in the stool that you can identify, mostly undigested food. So one thing that I ask when I do intake for people that are working with me, Vitality Circle members, are is I ask them what their poop tends to look like. And the choices that I just give 3 choices to say, does your poop generally look more like pebbles, a ripe banana, or a cow patty? And so these 3 choices give me an indication. And so some people will say, yeah, it's kind of like a cow patty, but sometimes it doesn't even stick together in a cow patty. It's really, really loose. Or it's kind of like pebbles, but more like logs. Okay, so that gives people a place to start. Ideally, as I mentioned before, we want to have a stool that's 12 to 18 inches long and looks like a ripe banana. Okay, but a lot of us don't have that ever, or very often, or definitely not all the time. So here's some things that we can look for, and some of you might be familiar with the Bristol stool chart. That's something you can look up if you're interested in looking at that, and it kind of looks at different types of stool. Okay, and so from the perspective of like me working with somebody, I'm looking to see if they tend towards constipation or towards diarrhea. And it's there are multiple types, especially of constipation. And so constipation would look like if you are not having a bowel movement every day. That's kind of like clear constipation, if you're not having at least one bowel movement every day. But it could also be if the bowel movements aren't complete, if they feel really sluggish. And so there's different doshas that can come into play with different digestive offset when it comes to constipation. So the qualities of dry and rough are one type of constipation. So this would be more like the pebbles type of stool. So there's not enough moisture in the digestive tract or in the diet to support having bulky and soft stool. So it ends up being hard and dry, more of these pebbles. So this is more a Vata type of constipation. And that shows up in missed bowel movement. So Vata type constipation can look a lot like you don't poop very often. And this was me a decade ago, but definitely for a couple decades prior to that. So it might look like you're having a bowel movement a couple times a week, that you have to strain to have a bowel movement, and that what you produce is very dry and dense. So it's like pebbles, but they're very compacted. Yeah. So another type of constipation is Kapha type of constipation, which looks more like slow and congested elimination. So this shows up more like you might feel like your digestion is just moving really slow. You eat a meal, you feel like you have a rock in your stomach and it's not moving through very quickly. So this can also look like a huge amount of stool, but you're not having an elimination very often. So Kapha type of constipation might also look like skipping days, but when you have a bowel movement, it's not pebbles, it's maybe more like the banana or like the cow patty, but you're not eliminating soon enough or fast enough. Your transit time is not timely, right? And that's a quality of Kapha, is that it's slow and cool and cloudy and wet. And so this Kapha energy might need some warmth, whereas the Vata energy needs more lubrication. Make sense? And then the third type of constipation, which can go hand in hand with either of the other two that I already mentioned, is a loss of peristalsis. And so peristalsis is the squeezing motion in the colon that actually has to engage to release stool from the body, to have a bowel movement. And so the loss of peristalsis can come from multiple different things. It can come from taking laxatives, especially the herb senna, creates peristalsis in your body, so it takes away the natural peristalsis. Other things like coffee does the same thing. So some of you might be reliant on coffee to have bowel movements, that you don't have a bowel movement unless you drink coffee. And this over time creates vata imbalance in the digestive tract because you are creating more dryness. Coffee is very drying. You're creating more dryness without letting the body have natural peristalsis. It can also come from eating, back to the vata imbalance for constipation, eating too much cold, dry, and rough food can take out the peristalsis. So you might find, this was my story years ago, was that I was like, I'm going to be so healthy. And so I just started eating salad, like all the time salad. And then I would also have some corn chips sometimes. So as a vata predominant body, my body didn't like that very well. And so but I kept eating. I'm going to be healthy. I'm going to eat salad. This is our kind of cultural message. If you want to be healthy, eat lots of salad, right? Which doesn't work for vatas or kapha predominant folks. Pitta, sure, eat lots of salad. You'll poop really well. You'll feel great. And you'll wonder why the rest of the world doesn't poop well when they eat salad. However, as a vata predominant body, I was eating too much raw, cold, and rough food. So my body couldn't process it. I didn't have enough lubrication, and my Agni was very decreased. And I didn't have, so because that Agni was decreased, I started building up an Ama load, which then led to weight gain, even though I was just eating salad and corn chips, right? So I eat a lot more than that now, and I'm much thinner. So that's the irony here. And so I started taking a natural laxative that had senna in it, creating abnormal peristalsis or unnatural peristalsis. And I lost my ability to have natural peristalsis. And by the time I found Ayurveda, my teacher said, we're going to have to rebuild your peristalsis. And that took quite a bit of time. And what he initially told me was, you cannot eat anything raw or dry and crunchy. And I didn't for over a year to rebuild. And I was using herbs and not with senna in it, but Ayurvedic herbs to help me regain my natural peristalsis, and doing some exercises. So that can be really a challenge. So you might not know it right now. You're like, yeah, I have a bowel movement every day, but it's because you're drinking coffee. Sometimes alcohol does the same thing. It can create heat in the system, but it's ultimately drying. And then you're not actually supporting your overall well-being with clearing out of gunk with the bowel movements. You're creating more imbalance. So when we have any kind of constipation, we want to bring in, you don't even have to know if it's vata or kapha or whatever, if you're like, that doesn't make sense to me. But we want to bring in digestive herbs. So things like culinary herbs like cinnamon, nutmeg, cardamom, cumin, things like that, so that you're supporting your digestive ability, you're supporting the Agni. And then we also want to make sure there's enough hydration. So that comes from water and beneficial fat. So we want to have things like ghee, which is used a lot in Ayurveda. So ghee is a beneficial fat. It's butter with the milk solids removed from it. So it's like this pure, clean fat that also is the highest in butyric acid of any food. Butyric acid feeds the good gut bugs. Okay, so the parts of you that are not you, that you rely on to stay healthy, ghee feeds. So eating enough ghee, you might add a little bit to every meal if you tend towards that dry pebble elimination. And so you're lubricating and healing the digestive tract. If you have more of the sluggish stool, you want to make sure that you have enough warmth. So you're not eating anything cold, and that you might be adding more digestive spices to your diet in addition to heat. So you might have things like hot ginger tea before each meal to kindle the Agni and help move out the Ama. And we want to focus on foods that are, like I said, cooked, mushy, warm, and have some beneficial fat in them. So that's a good guideline for Vata season in general. So for autumn, when it gets drier, and you might even notice, even if you're not doing the detox, you might notice that your stool is just drier this time of year. If you start noticing your seasonal rhythms, you'll notice dryness showing up in the autumn. And it might be skin, it might be eyes, but it also might be in your elimination. And so if that's the case, you want to bring in some support. So here are some supporting things you can do for constipation. So wake up and drink hot water until you poop. And so you might also add some lemon to that, or a little apple cider vinegar. Like, if you're doing a quart, you could try, start with a quart, and you might just drink like a cup or two of it, but you could add like a tablespoon of some lemon juice or apple cider vinegar. So take time each morning to sit on the toilet after drinking hot water. So even if it's not productive, you start gaining the routine of you drink water and then you poop. And this might be after a little while. Like, I drink my water, I meditate, and then I go to the bathroom and eliminate. So you can try sitting on the toilet after you've had your hot water, and doing a squat or laying down and hugging your knees into your chest before sitting on the toilet can also help. It brings in Apana Vayu, which is the downward moving energy. It's one of the 5 types of subdoshas of Vata. So I'm going to use that downward moving energy. And if you can't poop, sit for a minute or two on the toilet, no pushing or straining, and then get up and go about your day. But you're beginning to train your body to have a bowel movement in the morning. And that's really what we want to do, ideally, is to have a bowel movement early in the day before we eat anything. So we're taking out the trash from yesterday before we start putting in more things for the body to digest and assimilate, so that we're starting with a clean, kind of like a clean kitchen each day for cooking and composting, we could say. So you can also use a squatty potty, so putting your feet up on something, prop your feet up so that you're in more of a squatting position. Toilets, modern toilets especially, have gotten even higher, and it puts us at a strange angle for the colon to release the stool. So having a squatty potty, or you can put your feet up on a little stool or a trash can in your bathroom. And so this allows the colon to be at a good angle for eliminating. Also, hydrating with warm water, maybe adding some ginger to that, or having ginger tea in between meals, is very, very helpful. And then you can also, there's a formula in Ayurveda called Triphala, which is Triphala, means 3 fruits. And these 3 fruits are Haritaki, Bibitaki, and Amalaki. And each of them is specific for a dosha and for one of your digestive organs. So Haritaki is specific for Vata, Amalaki for Pitta, and Bibitaki for Kapha. And so this formula is a tridoshic formula that is very helpful. It can be used for lots of different things, actually, but it's helpful for elimination if you take it before you go to bed in the evening. So we want to eat at least 3 hours before we go to bed, and then if we take a little Triphala before going to sleep, it's in our digestive system all alone while we're sleeping, and that can do great wonders towards really clearing out ama and also helping you have an awesome elimination the next day. So you can take Triphala. You could also take magnesium citrate. Some people do Calm, the powder that you can mix into water. You can also soak raisins in water overnight. So if you take 10 raisins, soak them in the water, and then in the morning drink the water that the raisins were in, and you can compost the raisins. That can also help you have a bowel movement. You can also do stewed prunes with ghee. So if you do prunes with like 6 prunes with a tablespoon of ghee with some water, and cook that down 20 or 30 minutes so that it creates stewed prunes, so they're kind of rehydrated and soft and they've got the ghee mixed in with them. And then you can eat 3 of those each morning before breakfast. That can also help bowel movements. If it's very severe and you need to move things out, you can take 2 tablespoons of castor oil mixed into a cup of ginger tea and drink that, and you should have a bowel movement within a couple hours. You want to make sure that the castor oil is organic and hexane free to do that. And you also and you can do that before you go to bed too. The castor oil, the digestion slows down, and then usually that creates a bowel movement the next morning. And also, you might try eliminating grain, meat, and dairy, as well as any cold, dry, crunchy foods, and raw, to see if they're kind of clogging up your main drain, and add more beneficial fats, as I mentioned before. All right. So those are some tips for if you struggle with having at least 1 bowel movement a day. So Vata constitutions will usually have 1 bowel movement a day. If they're healthy, ideally, you get at least one bowel movement a day. Pittas often have 2 to 4 bowel movements a day. Totally normal for Pitta. And then Kaphas often have 1 to 2 bowel movements a day. A little larger and maybe feel a little more sluggish, but still moving through in that way. So that just gives you an idea if you know your predominant constitution, predominant dosha. So let's look at if you have loose stool or diarrhea tendencies. And this really shows too much heat in the system, but it can also show a depleted microbiome, as can constipation, honestly. But often I don't know if you've ever had the experience of taking antibiotics and getting diarrhea, or getting put on a new medication and it changing your stool, often making it loose. This is a disrupted microbiome response. But it can also show up if there's too much heat in the system. So this can be too much acid. It can be from eating too much spicy, salty, or sour foods. And we can really do well to cool down the system. And so just avoiding spicy, sour, and salty foods can go a long way towards that. Having cooling teas, so you might try drinking mint tea, or having CCF tea, the cumin, coriander, and fennel tea. That's a traditional formula in Ayurveda. It can be really helpful for just calming down the heat that's in the gut. You can also drink some aloe juice. If you're having acid reflux, you can put a pinch of baking soda into the aloe juice. So you could do 2 tablespoons of aloe juice, or a 1/4 cup, depending on how severe your symptoms are. That will help cool and calm the digestive tract. Also reducing fermented foods. If you are eating ferments, that can be really helpful to cool down. And you can increase binding fiber, like you can take psyllium or flax and grind that up. You can take a tablespoon in some water. And a nice time to do that is in between lunch and dinner, just to kind of calm the system down and create a little binding. You can also eat a banana every day. That can be a helpful binder as well. And and I mentioned the aloe juice. Excellent. So another thing that we want to think about in terms of the digestive tract functioning properly, which then creates proper elimination, is this principle of spanda, of expansion and contraction. So expansion and contraction is a principle of life. We breathe. Inhale, expansion, exhale, contraction. The day is expansion, night is contraction. Summer, expansion, winter, contraction. Life, expansion, or birth, expansion, death, contraction. This is a principle for us. We also need to experience spanda in our digestive tract. So when we eat a meal, we want to fully receive that meal and then let it fully digest. So we want to expand with the meal and then contract. And having that space in between, at least 3 to 4 hours in between food intake, is really key, because that's the time when the body does its work. If we're always digesting, that energy that could go elsewhere for cellular repair or healthy gut microbiome support gets distracted and pulled in for digestive strength. It takes a lot of energy to digest food. And so when we can give our bodies space and time in between those digestive requests, we experience better digestion and elimination altogether. So I hope that you feel like you've gained some insights into this subject that a lot of people don't want to talk about. It's very interesting to me how many Western doctors, when you go in for a checkup, will ask you all sorts of questions, but nothing about how often you're pooping, what your poop looks like. There's so much that you can gain from knowing more about both ends of the snake, the tongue and what's coming out of your body. So I hope that you have healthy poops, healthy, happy poops, and feel free to let me know if you try anything here. And I'm cheering you all on to have happy and healthy microbiomes so that your whole being can be happy and healthy, especially as we journey through the autumn season when it can get very compromised. All right, everyone, take care.